If you're in the advertising and marketing business, you probably know some of the ads this man's company's created. If you're not in the advertising marketing business and you run a business of your own, you need to get to know this man. And I'm talking about the one and only Daniel Harmon from Harmon Brothers. He's my guest next.
Helping business owners in growth mode go farther, faster. This is EntreGrow.
The only man who can turn poop into gold. Daniel Harmon, welcome to the EntreGrow podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Spanky.
Great to see you again. It has been one full year. In fact, the day that we're recording this podcast episode, it's 1 full year since we both spoke at Social Media Marketing World. Can you believe it?
Oh, wow. I was not keeping track, but yes, you're right.
Yeah, last night would have been the dinner. We had a great dinner that night. I still remember fondly our conversation. And then the next day, it was the Whirlwind Conference, followed by a worldwide lockdown.
Yeah, it was shortly after that. So it was that was some interesting times.
The last live event I got to speak at, I don't know about you, but it was
for sure.
The world has changed, but hopefully we're getting back to normal soon. That's all. Fingers crossed for everybody.
That's right.
Daniel, for those that don't know you or Harmon Brothers, I just want to paint a quick picture. If you Google search things like Squatty Potty, if you Google search things like Poo Pourri, the company that created those magical ads, Murphy Ladders, is Harmon Brothers. They are known for quirky, creative, fun ads that really bring people to the brand and the brand to people in a very connected way. For those of you that know my company and have maybe seen our ad, it was inspired by the stuff that Daniel and his team do at Harmon Brothers. And I absolutely love the creativity that they put into their ads. A lot of small business owners, Daniel, think that they need a gigantic budget to create a memorable, sticky ad. And I always say that that's not the truth. You don't need a huge budget. You just need passion, an idea, and a smartphone if you don't have anything else. I'd love a little bit of input from you on what a small business owner, whether they're e-com or a service-based business, can do. How do they tap into that creative?
I think it starts with knowing, I think it starts with the essence or truth of your product or service. If you can really speak to the clarity of the solution that your product or service provides to, whatever problem it might be for whatever audience that you're speaking to, I think that's always the starting point. I say around here all the time, nothing sells better than the truth. And I really believe that when you speak with clarity about what value you provide and what solution your product or service provides, then people are going to start to flock to you. They're going to start to adopt what you have. They're going to kind of join your clan. And you said it best. I mean, everyone's got a smartphone, which means everyone has a video production company in their pocket. Yeah. You can shoot on it. You can edit on it. You can write on it. You can do all these things. None of us are essentially limited, not in a real sense. We might be mentally, but like it's all there.
I'm very mentally limited, Daniel. But you already know that.
Well, aren't we all in some way, right? We're all on that mental limitation spectrum of some kind. But I think if you have a really great concept or idea, you can get that to come across clearly with whatever tools you've got around your house. And you don't have to feel like you need to go invest tons of money to make something effective. I always recommend doing something cheap before you do it expensive anyway. We've had companies that have approached us, small companies, and they say, "Oh, here's what's working. We just need it to, we need it to be a lot better. We need to take it further into the world of branding. We need to have another level of professionalism now. Right. Now that we've got our basis of sales, now that we know that these messages are working, can you guys just start pouring gasoline on that fire?" And that's a little bit of what we're best at anyway, is kind of scaling things up once they've sort of nailed it down. But yeah, I'd say don't be afraid just because you don't have the Hollywood production camera or the big budgets or whatever it is, you can make this stuff happen.
It's amazing when you talk about, and I did mention the smartphone and you really reiterated that. But if you look at any of the ads Apple is running for the iPhone right now, they're showing you how they make cinematic advertising with the smartphone. They're actually showing you, they're giving you a master class in how to use the thing. So as a business owner, if you watch that ad, you might get inspired to go, oh, wait a second. So Google those ads because that'll show you how to film it. But let's step back from the technical stuff. Let's get into the stuff that you and I love, which is the creative stuff.
Right.
If you're an attorney, or if you run a funeral home, or if you're pick any industry that isn't poop spray, deodorant, things like that, how do you find that little creative hook? Like the Harmon Brothers have a very unique process. Could you share a little bit of that with the audience to help them understand how to tap into that themselves?
Yeah. So the start of our process is to align ourselves with partners that we believe in. So we have to be passionate or have a belief in the product or service that we're going to do a campaign for. That's the first and foremost. Again, nothing sells better than the truth. When we communicate with that level of passion, that authenticity, that comes across, and it's a much better sales tool than if we were just, shilling for whatever product or service just walked in the door. And so we're very selective about who we partner with. Has to be something that we feel like is making a real legitimate difference for good in the world. And then from there, the approach that we take is we do our best to try to become the customer. So that means taking the product or service, putting it in our own lives, experiencing it for ourselves, and seeing kind of where's that aha moment for us. Where do we realize, oh, that's why this works as well as it does, or that's how this is delivering on its promise. So for example, with Poo Pourri, we took it and used it ourselves and saw, okay, yeah, this really does cover the odor when you go to the bathroom. Or the Squatty Potty. It's a matter of using it and seeing, oh, I am going to the bathroom faster. Oh, this does feel healthier. This feels like it's a more natural way for you to go to the bathroom. And then purple, sleeping on a purple. All of those things we kind of put in place, or using the Murphy ladder or the Camp Chef woodwind, whatever it is. We always try to put ourselves in the shoes of the customer so that we can relate with them, so that we can speak as a customer. And that's a little bit of, I think, the advantage that we have is approaching it first and foremost as a customer rather than as like an advertiser.
Right. So if you're a business owner that knows your business, you probably already are very familiar. You believe in what you're selling, your product or your service. And by the way, if you're in a service-based business, a lot of people believe or hold a belief that if you're in a service-based business, you can't do creative ads like this. And I don't know about you, but I call BS, because I'm in a service-based business and this is how we sell our business. You, sir, are in a service-based business, and guess what? That's how you sell yours, right?
Yes.
So don't hold a limiting belief about, well, I'm a funeral director. And I want to share this story because funeral, for some reason, that popped into my head again recently. We had a client in the funeral space that was trying to differentiate themselves in ad creative. And one of the things that we did is we took a chance and we did an ad that was all about celebration of life parties. And we did an ad that talked about putting the fun back in funerals.
Right. I remember you telling me about this.
And it was just like, so when you see the ad, it's a little shocking, but at the same time, it grabs people's attention. You can create an ad based on any industry, any service. But what you should do is really get into a creative space and think about, as Daniel just said, your customer. What is their experience of your business? Is there a way to get yourself into that customer's mentality? Because I know as a business owner, you have a 30,000-foot view of what you believe your customer's experience is, but how do you actually get into that experience?
So for us, it's fairly simple because someone will send us a product or they'll give us the service or whatever to experience for ourselves the first time. And so we get to go through that sort of process of discovery of knowing what that's like when it's new and fresh. We have an advantage there. when you're the actual owner of the business, you get a little too close to the product sometimes to even know how to speak to people about it. And so I think the greatest shortcuts to being able to overcome that sort of curse of knowledge of like, you just know too much and you don't know what it's like to not know
You're
that
too
much
deep
about
in the
the product.
weeds.
Yeah, you get too into the weeds. You talk about the wrong features or the wrong things. You get focused on the wrong stuff. And you end up just not communicating clearly with your customer. So I think the fastest ways to overcome that is if you can't do it in person, then do it on a computer, and that's just read a ton of reviews and start looking for patterns of the things that people mention as what they like most about the product, or what is the main problem that they're trying to solve in their lives with this product. What's the feature that they call out the most? What are the words that they most often use to describe their experience, the emotions that they're having with your product? So, and when I say a ton of reviews, I mean a ton. I mean, like, literally read hundreds of these reviews,
right?
And you can categorize. You can develop a spreadsheet. You can sit there and itemize. Okay, this is how many times people mention, like, let's just take the Squatty Potty, for example. This is how many times people mention that they're going to the bathroom faster. That's a big thing to them, or that it's helping them out with their constipation or with their hemorrhoids. Or whatever it is, that you could start to see patterns of what people are repeating, and it gives you more insights as to what is most important to a customer. And then above and beyond that, I think there's a ton of insight that you can gain from just having personal interactions. So you take your product and you give it away to someone. You find a friend or a neighbor, just try this thing out. Film them, film what they're like the first time they use it. Like, when do they have their eyes kind of brighten up of like, oh, that's cool.
Right.
What are some of the comments that they make as they're in that discovery process themselves? If you can kind of take people through that and have them experience it, or just that filming in the moment, I think you can gain a lot of insight in that way. But you have to sort of remove yourself to some degree, because again, you end up understanding things so well that it's really hard to talk to someone who doesn't understand it.
Right. In the case of like one of your clients, Murphy Ladder, what really sold me on a Murphy Ladder was one thing in the ad. Now, I love the ad in and of itself because it was a Harmon Brothers ad, right? I happen to be a fan of the kind of advertising you do because that really resonates with me. I love humor.
Right.
But there was one thing in the ad as a consumer, as a homeowner, that got me, and it was the fingers getting caught when you close the ladder, right?
Oh yeah.
How many times has that happened where you've pinched your finger
Sure.
as you're folding the ladder up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like, I need this ladder because it happens every time, and it's not just once or twice. So you have to really look at the pain points of your consumer, no matter what your product or service business is.
And to your point, we made a little ad, all based around that moment within the ad. So we made a little 15-second version of that. And we ran it on Facebook and Instagram and different places. And it was one of our better performing ads. And we were just like, really? This is that big of a thing to people that they're getting their fingers pinched in the ladders? But I guess, like you said, for you, that was the moment that sold you. So for sure.
That was the sales. That was the deal, the part that closed the deal for me.
Closed the deal. Yeah.
Absolutely. So now let's talk about something that you taught me last year, and that was split testing. You mentioned testing things. One of the things that I got from you, a nugget I got from you from having dinner with you, and I was so grateful. And by the way, as soon as we were done with that dinner, I was on my phone dictating notes because I'm like, I cannot forget this. The value of split testing thumbnails first. And this was a huge thing for me because I'm like, oh my goodness, why wouldn't I have ever thought of that? But I'd love you to dive into the Harmon Brothers process of split testing, what you test first and why, and then what you test next, please.
Yeah, you bet. So there's a book called Don't Make Me Think. And it's a little bit of I don't know if you'd call it a Bible, but it's a book that people go back to a lot as far as understanding human behavior online. And one of the main things that it talks about in that book is the fact that people don't read, they scan. That's how they view the internet, is that you're not actually going through and reading everything as much as you want to believe. Oh, they're going to see this first on their website. And this. No, their eyes just dart around and kind of what grabs the attention, right? And so this is why thumbnails are so critical for helping out a campaign and it's the first and foremost thing you want to, if you only have a very limited testing budget, thumbnails are probably the first and foremost thing that you're going to want to test, assuming you at least have a message that works to some degree in your copy, in your headline. But it's because a picture says 1,000 words, and it just, as they're scrolling, that's what's going to grab their attention, is that first thing that they see. And so, yes, we go through a process of testing maybe a dozen different thumbnails on a given campaign, where maybe it's someone's head up really close, or maybe it's a really close-up thing of the product doing whatever its thing is, or maybe it's some sort of an application where you're seeing something in action, or there's just all different kinds of visuals that you want. You want really distinct visuals. You don't want the difference between like my face here this way and then my face with a smile. Like that could be something that you do test over time, but that's maybe not going to get you as much data as the difference between showing a product and showing someone's face, right. Getting really visually different. So thumbnails, we do a lot of testing on them. That's kind of our first and foremost like needle mover for a campaign. And then we test the headlines or the title copy, right? Of whether it's your YouTube video or it's your Facebook video, whatever it is. How does that play? That can also be a big mover. And those are the first two things, especially if you have a limited budget. If you have a more extensive budget, then you can get into testing things like, especially on your campaign, like one that's a 2-minute edit, another one that's a 1-minute edit, right? Or if you are testing the difference between different intros, the first 5 seconds of your video. What gets people to watch through or view through more?
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Does that mean you edit things out of sequence?
Yeah, 100%.
Oh my! Wait a second. That's not right. People think linearly, Daniel. How do you edit something out of sequence and have it make sense? Isn't that gonna confuse your audience?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's all in the testing, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, there's a little bit of a norm that's been built up online now where people will tease something, like even a movie trailer. They'll give you 5 amazing shots that kind of grab your eye before they say the following trailer is approved for all audiences. That before they go to that green screen or the production company logo, which is going to be typically kind of boring compared to,
right.
Seeing Spider-Man swing, through some skyscrapers and an explosion and a kiss or whatever it is, right? That they'll kind of do a teaser up front. So you can do a teaser to your ad before the ad, just so that people are just kind of pulled in and have some interest. And depending on how you edit it together, it doesn't have to be linear. It could just be the thing that like hooks them in. It's like, oh, here's a little taste. Now you're going to want to stick around because this is coming up later. Or it could be linear. We test both, right? There are ways of doing both, but we also, as we write our content, we do it very modularly. So what I mean by that is we'll take any like paragraph or couple of paragraphs and say, can this stand on its own, either as an ad by itself, or if we were to move it to the front, could that work if it was placed out of order? And it's like building blocks that you can kind of shuffle around in different ways. And that's a little bit of how we approach the creative, is we try to be very, very modular in our thinking so that we can re-edit to find out what works best for the customer. And again, it all comes down to the testing.
Right. So it sounds like the way to approach this for a business owner that's listening to this is to think a little more plug and play when you're writing. Right.
Yeah.
If this sentence and this block can work as the open, and again, Daniel, it was so valuable what you taught me. And I think of myself, I've been in the creative industry since I was 18. I'm 53 now. I've been at this a long time. And I remembered hearing that from you and going, wow, I never would have thought. And that split test was so valuable to me because the winning thumbnail was one that I personally didn't think was going to do anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that kind of stuff happens all the time. It's really a crapshoot.
yeah,
Because we'll make our bets on what we think will work the best, and sometimes it works out, and then sometimes it really does not, and it's just like something you never would have dreamed. And then once you see the data, hindsight's always 20/20, right?
sure.
You all of a sudden start getting insights of like, oh, that finger pinch thing is really resonating for people, right?
Right.
Those kind of things kind of come after the fact once you're able to see the data come in and see the way customers are responding to things. But just to believe you know best because you're an awesome creative or you're just some genius or something like that, I think is just I think if those people exist, they're very few and far between in the world.
Right.
And I think for the most part, even when you have brilliant people, they can always be made better through good science and data.
100%. You know, as business owners, you hold a belief about what you think is valuable to your customers and what you think is going to resonate with them. But I can tell you time and time again, and Daniel's experience with Harmon Brothers ads proves it, you've got to test everything because those variables, the ones you believe are the ones that are going to win, oftentimes don't. And if you would have told me when we started split testing for our big ad that the winning thumbnail was the girl eating the chicken leg over the KFC bucket really close up, I would have been, no, I would never have picked that. But again, the audience tells you what the winner is, right?
That's right.
Don't hold that creative precious just because it's yours.
Yeah, and I would say this: I'm a brand guy. I always think of myself that way as a brand guy. And you don't want to put anything out there that you feel like will go against your brand. That is the first test. Is if you like, even if it's something that could pull your audience in really well, if it's not going to be what you want your brand to be, if it goes against something ethical or something morally or just something of what your long-term vision for the brand is in a really counterintuitive way, not just in like a way you didn't think about, but like, no, we can't go there for XYZ reason, then just don't put it out there and test, right? Because you might find some of that weird stuff that moves the needle, but like you don't want everybody to become like, if you don't keep brand in mind, then you end up going down the spam rabbit hole where everything ends up feeling like clickbait, or all your thumbnails end up including cleavage or something along those lines. Like you just have to kind of take those things into account.
I took all those thumbnails down. You didn't have to call me out for it.
Didn't have to get all personal about it.
Daniel, what are you working on right now at Harmon Brothers? What like new creative projects and insight, things that you can share with the audience are you working on, and where do you draw inspiration from for new ideas? Because there's definitely a formula that works, right? And it seems to be like when I see an ad, if you sat me down and made me watch 20 ads, I could identify a Harmon Brothers ad like that. What are you working on? What's new? And how do you get that inspiration to shift up the creative, to do something different? Talk to me and walk me through that.
So some of the inspiration for shifting things up is in diversity of personnel. So as we approach it, we just bring different writers together with different perspectives, and that's a lot of how you'll get different thinking. It's just people that have grown up in different areas, had different life experiences, and so just by nature they're going to bring different perspectives. We depending on the product, we usually have a pretty good balance between men and women on the writing team. If it's a product specifically for women, we often try to have, if it's a team of 4 writers, then we're going to look for at least 3 of them to be women, sometimes all, so that voice comes through and that relatability. So a lot of it comes down to that, finding the right talent for that. For us, that's a lot about finding good comedic talent, people that have a lot of experience in either stand-up or improv or sketch comedy or something along those lines. So you're not training comedy into somebody. You've got someone that has developed that skill set,
right.
And then you're more training them a little bit on sales and marketing. That's an easier transition to make from, you've already got the comedy thing down. You've developed that skill set. Now let's teach you some skills around advertising, marketing, and branding. That's an easier jump to make than the other way around. Just comedy is just something that just takes years and years to develop, and anybody can get better at it.
Right.
But I'd much rather invest in a comedian that's been doing it for years than trying to go the other way around and find an advertiser and try to make them funny. Okay, so maybe that answers a portion of your question.
That was great. So what new stuff are you guys working on over at Harmon Brothers?
Yeah. So some new things. We've got different crowdfunding type initiatives that are coming down the pike, meaning different companies that are actually raising, looking to raise investment for their company themselves, not just sell a product, but actually the creation of the product. And so we're getting involved in some of that in regards to things like original content. So we already did this with ourselves in raising over $1 million from the crowd in the way of investment for a show called Tuttle Twins that I'm the showrunner on. And that's based on a book series that sold over 2 million copies. And it teaches kids about principles of freedom, economics, and individual rights, entrepreneurship, those kinds of things. And so we're turning that into a TV series, a cartoon TV series for kids. And we got some investment for it. So that's a little bit of what I'm working on in that way. And those are some of the projects that we actually have kind of hitting us up a little bit right now, aside from the normal consumer packaged goods stuff that, comes in all the time, or different services and things like that people are looking to promote. We've got different media projects and things that people are starting to kind of, we've now got well, anyway, yeah, that's as far as I guess I need to get into that one for now. But anyway.
That is awesome. If people want to get inspired, to be inspired by some of the creative you guys do, what is the best way for them to follow you? If there is the business owner out there who's interested in working with Harmon Brothers, what's the best way, the best person to contact?
HarmonBrothers.com is always going to be the best place to start out, and you can fill out a form there to see if we're a good fit for each other, and then someone will reach out to you. It'd probably be Kurt that leads up our business development team would be one that would get out to you. I'm on LinkedIn. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. That's another way to get a hold of us. But a lot of people try to get our attention by just sending product to our office, and it's a really good way to get buy-in, because again, one of our first and foremost requirements is that a creative director has to have some belief and be bought into the product to some degree. And so a lot of people will send us things to try out, and that having something physically here in the office goes a long ways, as opposed to like an email or something like that, where it might get filtered out before it's time or something along those lines. I mean, we try to give everyone we can a fair shake, but you know how it is when there's a lot more demand than there is supply, then you just kind of have to pick and choose a little bit. So when people send us things, it kind of gets our attention a little bit more.
Yeah, you got to weed through those things. Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today on the EntreGrow podcast. I know.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Thank you. I know there's a lot of small business owners out there who are trying to figure out how to navigate this new world. Many business owners didn't think that they were going to have to go fully virtual a year ago. And when the world changed like that, sometimes you have to think about, does my messaging have to change along with the situation? And it's okay to be creative, to test new things, and to be flexible with your messages. Remember, a version 1 is always better than a version none. And
yes. Love that.
Imperfection is really okay when you're starting out. Daniel, again, thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to our next visit, and I look forward to when we can actually get face-to-face.
That would be awesome. I
might hop up there to Salt Lake so I can see some snow, because we're here in the valley.
This hasn't been the greatest snow year for us, but there's still some on the mountains.
Good. Keep it there for me, all right?
That's right. Okay. Thanks, mate.